The woman standing in my hallway has my exact face, but she's been dead for 3 years. I know because I killed her. But let me back up. It started 6 months ago when I moved into apartment 4B at Meridian Heights. The rent was suspiciously cheap for downtown, but I didn't question good luck. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, handed me the keys with shaking hands and muttered something about the previous tenant leaving suddenly. She avoided eye contact when I asked why. The apartment was perfect. Hardwood floors, huge windows, vintage fixtures. I should have known something was wrong when I realized I was the only person under 60 in the entire building. The first week passed peacefully. I unpacked, arranged furniture, started my remote job from the spare bedroom. The neighbors were quiet, almost too quiet. I'd pass them in the hallways sometimes, these elderly residents who'd lived here for decades. They'd nod politely, but never spoke. Mrs. Chen lived in 4A, right across from me. I'd hear her moving around at odd hours, always the same pattern. Footsteps to the door, pause, footsteps away, like she was checking something or watching. The building had an old-fashioned elevator with a metal gate, the kind that groans and shudders. Sometimes it would arrive without being called, doors opening to an empty car. Then I started hearing the footsteps above me. Apartment 5B was supposed to be empty. Mrs. Chen had mentioned it during the lease signing. But every night around 2 a.m., I'd hear someone pacing, back and forth, always the same route. I knocked on Mrs. Chen's door to ask about it. She opened it just a crack, her cloudy eyes wide with something like fear. "There's no one up there," she whispered. "There hasn't been anyone in 5B for years." She shut the door quickly, but not before I noticed the security chain was new, and there were at least 4 different locks. That night, I pressed my ear to the ceiling. The footsteps were directly above my bedroom, measured and deliberate. I decided to investigate. The next morning, I took the elevator to the 5th floor. The hallway was identical to mine, but something felt off. The air was staler, colder. I walked to where 5B should be, but the door number was faded, barely visible. I pressed my ear against it, silence, but the doorknob turned easily. Inside, the apartment was empty except for decades of dust and a single chair facing the window. The window looked down into my bedroom. On the floor beside the chair were deep grooves in the hardwood, worn by years of pacing. I backed out quickly, but as I turned to leave, I saw fresh footprints in the dust. They were exactly my size. That night, the pacing started again. But this time, I was ready. I grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs. The elevator felt different, slower, like it was reluctant to reach the 5th floor. When the doors opened, the hallway was pitch black. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I walked to 5B. The door was locked now, but as I stood there, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The pacing had stopped. In the silence, I could hear breathing from inside. Slow, deliberate breaths that matched my own rhythm perfectly. Then a voice, muffled by the door, spoke in a tone I recognized immediately. It was my voice asking, "Why did you come here?" I ran, took the stairs 2 at a time, burst into my apartment and triple locked the door. But the voice followed me down, through the walls, through the floor. I could hear it whispering my name. I called Mrs. Chen, demanded answers. She finally agreed to meet me in the lobby at midnight. When she arrived, she looked like she'd aged a decade in one day. "I should have told you," she said, wringing her hands. "The previous tenant in 4B, she died 3 years ago, suicide. But before she died, she was obsessed with the empty apartment upstairs. She said someone was watching her, someone who looked exactly like her." My stomach clenched. "What was her name?" I asked. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah Martinez. Sarah Martinez. My name is Sarah Martinez." Mrs. Chen stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. "That's impossible," she breathed. "You can't be." "She's dead. I found her body myself. I showed her my ID, my lease agreement, everything. But her horror only deepened. This building," she whispered, "it does things, takes people and reflects them. The previous Sarah, she discovered something about apartment 5B. She found out why the building was so cheap, why tenants never stayed long. The elevator dinged behind us, though neither of us had called it. The doors opened to reveal a figure standing inside. Even in the dim lobby light, I could see she had my face, but her eyes were hollow, and when she smiled, I saw that her teeth were stained with rust. The other Sarah stepped out of the elevator, moving with jerky, unnatural movements. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her voice an echo of mine, but wrong somehow, like a recording played backwards. Mrs. Chen fled, her keys jangling as she disappeared into the night. I was alone with myself. The doppelganger circled me slowly, studying my face like she was memorizing it. "I've been waiting so long for a replacement," she said. "Do you know how exhausting it is to maintain a death? How much energy it takes to stay gone?" She reached out to touch my cheek, and her fingers were ice cold. "The building needs a Sarah Martinez in 4B. It always has. I've been holding the space, but I'm tired now. I tried to run, but the lobby doors wouldn't budge. The windows showed only black. Not the street I knew was outside, but absolute void." The other Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You can't leave until the exchange is complete. That's how it works. One Sarah dies, one Sarah lives. The building gets its tenant, and the cycle continues." She began to change, her skin growing pale and waxy, her hair falling out in clumps. "I died by hanging," she said conversationally, as a purple ring appeared around her neck. "Quick and relatively painless. But you have a choice. You can die your own way, or you can take my place and wait for the next Sarah Martinez to move in." The building began to shake, or maybe I was shaking. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with an organic rhythm. Through the floor, I could hear other voices, all the previous tenants, trapped in their own cycles. Mrs. Chen hadn't been the landlord for decades. She was tenant number 73 from 1962, destined to repeat her role until someone replaced her too. The other Sarah was decomposing before my eyes, but she smiled with genuine relief. "It's almost over," she whispered. "Choose quickly. Death or endless repetition until the next you arrives." I looked around the lobby. There was no longer a lobby, but something alive and hungry. Then I made my choice. I grabbed her throat and squeezed until the light left her eyes. She crumbled to dust in my hands, and suddenly I was back in my apartment. Everything was normal. The street lights outside, the hum of traffic, the familiar sounds of city life. But I knew the truth now. I'd killed myself to save myself, committed murder to avoid becoming a ghost. The building had accepted my choice, satisfied with the violence it had orchestrated. I tried to leave that very night, but the door wouldn't open. My car keys turned to dust in my hands. Phone calls wouldn't connect. The building had claimed me, and now I was part of its pattern. But at least I was alive. At least I was still Sarah Martinez, the real one. Or so I told myself as I settled into the routine of checking the door every night at 2 a.m. Months passed. I learned the building's rules through trial and error. Never go to the 5th floor after midnight. Never answer the elevator when it arrives uncalled. Never look too closely at the other residents. Some of them have been dead for decades, but don't know it yet. Mrs. Chen brings me groceries that taste like cardboard, payment for services rendered. I keep the apartment clean, maintain the illusion of life, wait for the next Sarah Martinez to see the listing online. The building is patient. It's been doing this since 1892, cycling through identical tenants, feeding on their fear and confusion. I found records in the basement, hundreds of Sarah Martinez's, all identical, all meeting the same fate. But I survived. I broke the pattern by embracing it, which brings me back to tonight. You're standing in my hallway, reading your lease agreement for apartment 4B. Your name is Sarah Martinez, just like mine, just like all the others. You have my face, my mannerisms, even the same small scar on your left hand from a childhood accident. The building found you, called to you with cheap rent and perfect timing. You don't remember responding to the listing, but here you are, with keys that fit perfectly. I want to warn you, but the rules won't let me. I can only watch as you unlock the door that used to be mine. But you're reading this story, aren't you? You found it somewhere online, maybe saved it before it got deleted like all the others. You recognize the address, don't you? You've been having dreams about apartment 4B, which means you're next. The question is, are you already here? Don't face the horrors alone. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. And if you want your nightmare seen, email it to stories@hallocroft.com.